sooner did you get absolutely penniless people to get to California, you know, within one generation they were building their cultural institutions. Like, what's up with that? And they'd have a fire and overcome it, and so forth. And now there's something really that makes, it's like gravity. You know, it takes years to recover from the hurricane with federal help. You know, when actually we used to recover from all sorts of hurricanes without federal help. And I think one of the things that we want to do is simplify the process. You know, when you have an idea, you want to renovate a building, you want to modify it, etc. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this, but we do have half a dozen ideas to make the place faster and higher quality. And by having a code, which the mayor mentioned, which is the form-based code, and basically it has a vision of the downtown that pre-negotiates it. And if you fulfill that code, you can move very quickly. Now, if you don't fulfill that code, you know, which is more precise and also thinner than the prior code, if you don't fulfill that code, then fine, you have to go through the process of getting variances and being checked up and rejected and so forth. But if you follow the code, you can move. And so this is just one of the things we're doing to comb away the impediments to development, to come back to the original that created a really wonderful Mobile so quickly. You know, we want to, you know, I don't know what we're supposed to think when we look at the historic photographs. You know, oh, it's a nice grid, what pretty buildings. What I think is, how did those guys do it with so very little money and so quickly and of such high quality? You know, and it feels almost like a different race. Now, here's Mobile, and this is a dreadful period. This is the period that the feds gave money to self-demolish the cities, and Mobile, incredibly progressive at the time, bought every single gift that Washington had to give. The highway, you can imagine, slum clearance, quote unquote, buildings that land like spaceships in the middle of nowhere. This is an interesting, do you see how that is? That does not fit in a city. It rejects a city. It does everything possible to not participate in the city. Everything that we do in our form-based code is to have the buildings participate in the city and add up one to the other, as opposed to the post-war system of the existing code in which buildings are all segregated from each other, and the result is that you have to drive from one to the other. It's not so much, it's not an aesthetic. In fact, some people like the 50s architecture now. It's the urbanism that's a disaster. And this is honestly a postcard from the period. What were they thinking? I don't know, but I had to put it up there. There's something wrong with these people, or at least these architects. And then you have the plans from the 1950s that are extremely imprecise, you know, and single use. Like, this is a single thing. This is commercial high-rise. This is residential. This is where the streets go. This is a suburban conception retrofitting the plan. You know, this is what suburban pods look like. Believe it or not, that's your downtown. There's your little park in the middle. And look at the kind of very, very coarse zoning that takes place there. You ended up with a lot of parking lots as a result of that. You also ended up with a ring street that not even the cars like to take, apparently. They're still sort of rat running inside the old grid. There are also prior plans like this one. This is a plan that was done in 2008 and published 2007, I think, and finally passed last year, the City of Mobile plan. We built on this one. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this plan. It was done by a good firm. It is unfortunately a little bit imprecise, and we're being more precise. But the really bad news is, if you're going to take 5 years to pass this one of ours, you're going to miss the great Airbus window. And Airbus has come here, and I think you are very excited about it. The world is in awe of Mobile for catching this prize, which is much more than the 1,000 jobs. It's much more than high tech. You're going to get a focus on here, you're going to have a creatively open window to do things that I assure you shuts. You have 5 years to get something done, to get the schools and the good restaurants and the people who come in from Europe to love your downtown and vice versa. And I could sit down for a couple of hours, and I have with people who know, and about not taking 5 years. In fact, taking the 5 years it took to pass this plan to implement the one that we're about to propose, because it's a very creative period. Now, there are historic districts, which are in yellow. This is our mapping. First thing we did is accurate mapping. So now you can really tell what's happening. You know, you can really tell that the outlines of the buildings, very easy to read, and if you want to know where the districts are and so forth, there's going to be a whole series, and ultimately you're all going to have this in your computer, this plan, and you'll be able to look up where you are, what zone you're in, etc. Hopefully you'll also look at this and correct any mistakes we may have had. You know, we did our best with a lot of local help, but these lines may be slightly in the wrong place. We'll adjust that. You have 2 local districts. They both serve to preserve quality. This is the Condi, and this is the one that is on both sides of Government Street, and that includes Dauphin. And then there's some of it that's outside. We are rigorously within our ring. We were asked to look outside. We said no. You know, there's enough to do in here. So we didn't take that temptation to look outside. We know where the bike lanes are coming in, and we made the crossing and we connected them, but we could not look beyond. I did a bit of that, but it's not in this plan. The districts have two positive and negative. One is there's a very strong tendency to preserve what's there rather than demolish it. Second of all, what's built is going to be compatible. Unfortunately, it's much more bureaucratic to get things done, and it turns some people off. By the way, the younger you are, the less means you have to go through process. Okay, when you're a young person and excited, you're barely making it getting hold of the land, you're barely making it getting the lease, you're certainly not going to hire. You know, you've got the muscles, you've got the know-how, you've got the friends to fix the building, but you haven't got the money to get that FEMA survey for elevation. You haven't got the money to have the whole thing professionally measured. You haven't got the money to have everything, to have the drawings done in 3 dimensions and stamped, and the engineers everywhere. Now, I'm going to speak about something that I've not spoken about before. I spoke about many abstract things, but this is one that I think is important. Every revitalization that has occurred in history has been led by a class of person, usually artists, gays, sensitive people, that actually have a great eye and no money. And they're called risk oblivious. It's the risk oblivious class. They look at something, they fall in love with it, and sure, there's crime, and sure, the beams are rotting, and who knows where the rats are, you know. And since the left bank of Paris was essentially revitalized in the 19th century, and Soho in New York, well, Greenwich Village, Soho, Key West, Palm Beach, Coconut Grove, just the places I know that have lived, the first people in are the risk oblivious. They don't have money. Okay. What allows them to act is that government hasn't noticed that they're there. And that's the beginning and the end of it. They go in and they inhabit the place. Then they make it cool. They make the place cool. You know, there's a nightlife, the restaurants are interesting, the people are interesting, the music's interesting. And then this second generation comes in, and this generation is called the risk-aware. And they're developers. Developers take risks, but they're risk-aware, and they actually do it properly. Already the value is higher, it's predictable enough, you know it's a cool place, and they can actually go through the process of FEMA and this and the ceiling, and they have the wherewithal to go in and get permits, however much the impediments are, and deal with the fire marshal, and get mortgages, and get insurance and everything. They come second. Any city that has to subsidize its developers, and there are many cities that do, is because the bureaucracy has eliminated the risk oblivious, the first generation. There is no first generation. So the second generation comes in and says, I haven't got the value to take the risk here, therefore give me money. And so you get the public-private partnerships, and you get the tax codes and everything. if you have to give developers money